Hi guys, I'm Tom here at MTG Arena Standard Decks. Today I'm going to be showing you a white-green Selesnya Enchantments deck. Now this is a really fun mid-range deck aiming to pump out lots of enchantments to buff our creatures up with a ton of +1/+1 counters so we can slap the opponent with some big old creatures straight to the face. We're going to have 7 creatures in the deck, and that is starting with Generous Visitor. This is going to be our turn 1 play. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and this is just going to be the beginning of our +1/+1 counters. Next, we have Spirited Companion. So whenever they enter the battlefield, draw a card, and this will be your main source of card draw in the deck. Moving on, we have Kami of Transience, a 2/2 spirit with trample, and whenever you cast an enchantment spell, they gain a +1/+1 counter. In addition, if an enchantment was put into your graveyard from the battlefield that turn, you get the option to return Kami to your hand at the beginning of either yours or your opponent's end step. We have Weaver of Harmony, an enchantment creature, which gives other enchantment creatures you control +1/+1, and you can also pay a forest land to tap this creature and copy an ability you control from an enchantment source, choosing a new target for the copy. We then have Jukai Naturalist. Now he is one of the best cards in this deck, an enchantment creature with lifelink that reduces the cost of enchantment spells you cast by 1 colourless energy, and this will often be the focus of your +1/+1 counters and your buffs to really make the most of that lifelink. Next, we have Catilda Dawnheart Martyr. So this is our late game boss card with flying, lifelink and protection from vampires, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of permanent spirits and enchantments we control. And because we'll be pumping out a lot of enchantments, which is also going to proc our Hallowed Haunting to create a spirit token for each enchantment played, then this creature can get very strong very quickly, even without any +1/+1 counters. And when destroyed, she becomes an enchantment herself, which you can attach to a creature to give all of her abilities I've mentioned over to them. And finally, we have Calix, Guided by Fate, a legendary enchantment creature and arguably the main card in our deck. Whenever he or another enchantment creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. And in addition, whenever he or an enchanted creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may create a token of a non-legendary enchantment you control once per turn. Now the keyword is enchanted creature, so that's any creature with Audacity attached in this deck. Next, we're going to look at the non-creature spells, specifically the removal. So we run 2 removal in this deck. Firstly, Circle of Confinement, which is an enchantment that when entering the battlefield, exiles target creature with mana value 3 or less that an opponent controls. And also, whenever an opponent casts a vampire spell with the same name as a card exiled with Circle of Confinement, you gain 2 life. And our other removal is going to be Ossification, an enchantment that enchants a basic land you control, and when Ossification enters the battlefield, exile a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Now we've got quite a few non-creature spells that are enchantments, and the first of this is Audacity. So you enchant a creature to give it +2/+0 and trample, and when Audacity is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card, which is great for only 1 forest. Next up, we have Michiko's Reign of Truth, a saga that gives a creature +1/+1 until the end of turn for each artifact and enchantment you control, and this will activate on the turn it is played and the turn after, and on the next turn it transforms into an enchantment creature portrait of Michiko, which is a 0/0 that gets +1/+1 for each artifact and enchantment you control. Next, we have the Restoration of Eiganjo, which is another saga, and this one's going to let you search your library for a basic plains card, reveal it, and put it into your hand on the turn that it is played. Next turn, you may discard a card, and if you do, you can return a permanent card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, and it is great if you have 2 lands in hand, as you can discard one and play it to the battlefield tapped, while still then playing your land for turn. And on the final turn, it will transform into Architect of Restoration, which is a 3/4 with Vigilance, and whenever it attacks or blocks, you create a 1/1 colourless spirit creature token, which can count towards Catilda's ability. Now finally we have Hallowed Haunting, which I mentioned earlier. This gives creatures you control flying and vigilance as long as you control 7 or more enchantments, which Calix's ability can help you reach quickly, as well as whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you create a white spirit cleric creature token whose power and toughness are each equal to the number of spirits you control. Now onto the lands. We run a variety of lands in this deck, starting with Eiganjo, Seat of the Empire. This is a plains land with a 3-cost discard from hand effect that deals 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature, costing 1 colourless less to activate for each legendary creature you control. We also have Boseiju, who endures, a forest land with a 2-cost discard from hand effect to destroy an artifact, enchantment or non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may then search their library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield, and again this ability costs 1 colourless less to activate for each legendary creature you control. And we have 3 types of dual lands. We have Razorverge Thicket for the early game, being played tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands. Then we have Overgrown Farmland for the later game, being played tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. We also have Brushland, which can add a colourless energy, or you can gain a forest or plains energy and take 1 damage. Now all of these are going to be useful being a dual colour deck to ensure that we can hit the cards we want. And we're also going to run 6 basic plains lands and 3 basic forest lands. We run these numbers as we have slightly more plains cards in our deck, but it's also important for us to have some basic lands in this deck, as our main removal, being Ossification, can only be attached to basic lands. Well, I've really enjoyed playing this deck, so I would advise everybody to get out there, give it a go, and good luck in your games.